Hello faithful viewers and welcome back to another review. This time we are looking at the Transformers Revenge of the Fallen Deluxe Class Soundwave. Now for a change, I'm starting a review with a figure in robot mode. Why? Well, let's just say the alternate modes for this guy are peculiar and a little bit nonsensical. Soundwave's most defining mode here is his robot mode, so it just makes a little bit more sense to start with this. And also I do believe from memory he was actually packaged in robot mode, probably because his vehicle modes are a little bit daft, as we'll see later. So taking a look at the robot mode, it is a very unique design with a few G1 inspired elements splashed around, most notably his head. So if we zoom in and take a look at that noggin, you've got the classic blue head and you've got the classic red visor. He kind of does have the mandible mouth thing that he had in the films there, so it's not like a faceplate like it is in G1. Coming down to the lower torso, we can see kind of like this disc kind of sound boombox kind of aesthetic still going on in terms of like the sonic spheres. Let's call them roundels. Let's make a Doctor Who reference and call them roundels. So he's got roundels on the chest, nice aesthetic. He has roundels on his shoulders there as well. And then you can see hints of them on his legs if you were to look on the back. The blue continues on, but his primary colour is this light grey. It's almost like a bluish grey. It's got a blue tint to it. He has a few red highlights here and there, and he has a gold trim around his chest roundels. He has a darker blue on his thigh area, but the light grey returns for his shins and his feet. These are two clawed feet here, so you've got two kind of toes, and then you've got a heel at the back there. He has kind of these blue spikes on his forearms, and very broad shoulders for like the sound emitters, if you will. And then coming onto his back, he is quite kibbly. He's got all these wings all over him, two there, one there, and he's got that, which it's kind of like an alternate face for him. And then he has this very interesting black protruding elongated dongle coming out of his back, and this is actually meant to be Ravage. I believe it's a play feature for the vehicle mode. So suppose we'll get on to articulation for Soundwave. His head is on a ball joint, but it can only turn about right that far and left that far because it's kind of hindered by the missile. But if the missile wasn't there, then in theory he would have 360 degrees of rotation. He can look up that far and he can look down. Nothing really, only about that far, which is just his neutral head position. In terms of his shoulders, he has a very decent 360 articulation there, especially helps if you move the wings out of the way. He has a 360 swivel at the elbow. He has kind of 2 points of bend there. There's one there, and then you've got the natural elbow of over 90 degrees. And then in terms of the arms, that's kind of it. He has nothing at the wrists at all, no finger articulation of any kind. He has nothing really at the waist. He has a beautiful spread, as you can see by that leg there. He can forward kick about that far. He can back kick, you know, a natural way. If the kibble wasn't there, and he'd have a greater range. I mean, you can kind of see it there. In terms of the knee, he has an over 90 degree bend at the knee. And then in terms of the ankles, he has a bit of ankle pivot and then individual toe articulation. And then, of course, he does have a 360 degree spin at the knees. In terms of the abs, he does actually have an ab crunch, which is kind of a transformation hinge really, but it counts. So in terms of articulation, this Revenge of the Fallen Soundwave is actually very good. For a size comparison, here is Revenge of the Fallen Soundwave next to Dark of the Moon Cyberfire Bumblebee. Here he is next to Legacy Armada Starscream. Here he is next to Rise of the Beasts Mainline Wheeljack. And then here he is next to Marvel Legends Mysterio. So coming on down to transformation, this is going to be a little bit weird because technically he's a triple changer. Now, getting into both modes is ridiculously easy. There's not much to it. It's just, can you actually define these as proper alternate modes? Let's take a look. So the first thing that we want to be doing with Soundwave is just covering his head. So there's a blue flat on his upper torso, which if we just get our thumbs into, we can flick up, and then if we just articulate his head, a certain way, we can actually get a very flush kind of formation going on there. It's just nice. It actually molds itself into the design of his head, because he's got a very angular brow about him, the shape of his visor, and it actually just slots in and covers it perfectly. So that's that. And then it might help if we just remove the Ravage missile, because it does have a habit of firing off. So there's a little button on there. I'll show that again in a little bit. And let's just rotate the top part of his backpack out like that and get these wings spread out just like that. I'm going to take this lower wing here and just extend it down. I'm going to keep his arms fanned out just for now. We'll deal with them last. And let's turn our attention to his legs. So close up his toes on either leg and then rotate them at the knee. And then you're going to bring the legs up just in on themselves and slot them just like that. So you're basically taking this part here and putting it just underneath the lip of the fake vehicle robot head, and you're just resting it like that. If you take the other one, bring it up, and then you're slotting the two blue pieces into one another just like that, and they will tab in very securely. And then just bring the toes together. The toes don't tab, unfortunately, but they just should rest in a triangular look like that. And then just make sure that they are reasonably central to the lower wing, just like that. And then turning our attention to the arms, I'm just taking a quick look at the instructions, because it's kind of personal preference as to what you do with these shoulder pads here, which will be thrusters of some kind. Now, if I were to actually follow the instructions word for word, you want to be keeping them like this. And then with the arms, all you want to be doing is just hinging them on themselves like that and spreading the spikes out just like that. Just like so. And then making sure that the shoulder pads are still bent at an angle. You take these wings and just flare them out like that. They don't tab into anything, unfortunately. They just sit down on top. And that is what the instructions define as a jet. It's not much of a jet, is it? Let's be honest. This is a mode that only exists in the video game. In Revenge of the Fallen itself, Soundwave is completely and utterly an alien satellite, which is the next mode that we will cover. Again, if you can really call it a satellite. But apparently this is a jet. And it kind of has a jet sort of thing going on. You've kind of got your nose cone here. There's no cockpit per se. You've got the wings. And it's a really dumb and stupid design, to be honest. Something I like to do to clean it up a little bit. I kind of don't have these shoulder pads situated like this. I actually like to just rotate them down, and it kind of reveals that one there. And I just like to fold them underneath. Again, they don't tab into anything, but they just rest. And then hinge these down just like that, so they are more covering the spikes. And it's not much of an improvement, but it's what I like to do personally. It kind of makes it ever so slightly more angular, which is appropriate for a jet. Not by much, granted, but hey. And that's his really weird and bizarre jet mode that is kind of exclusive to the video game. And having these bits down kind of helps cover up any robot kibble that is present, because like his head is still just poking out there. It's covered by this measly flap, which again is molded to the shape of his face, but it doesn't hide it very well. He does have visible head syndrome, and his arms just hang there. So having these down like this just kind of helps hide things a little bit more. But other than that, it's kind of a naff vehicle mode, isn't it? So let's have a look at what this figure defines as a satellite mode. And there isn't actually much to do to change him into this position whatsoever. The instructions just advise to have these flaps out like this. So it's just like that. And then you're taking these and bending them down And that's kind of it. Ladies and gents, this is Soundwave's satellite mode. It's really rubbish. Like, in what way is this a satellite? It's a Cybertronian thing. Like, he can claw onto something, I suppose. And how is this a satellite? What even is this? And I'll tell you what, though, it's better than the Studio Series version, because that sucks. That's awful. It's an even worse figure. So this is, I suppose, charming, if you will. Let's take a look at his accessories. So this is the Ravage missile. You won't be able to tell because of this camera's focus, even though I've got it actually focused very well here. There's sort of moulding to insinuate that this is Ravage, even though, like, there's nothing actually here that screams that character, but, you know, it's textured in a way that you think, okay, we kind of get what this is meant to be. And yeah, it's just a firing missile, because he does fire him from his satellite mode in the film. So if we just plug this in, I think it doesn't matter particularly what way it goes in, it just sits. And then there is a little button on there, and there you go. He fires. Funnily enough, though, this figure is inundated of light piping. Look at this illumination that he's got going on here. This is really nice. The shoulders get the brunt of it. The fake head also gets a nice bit of it there. And then in theory his chest would be able to also, but you just can't get a light round it, unfortunately, for it to be able to pick up and illuminate the way it should. But he's bristling full of light piping. That's actually really nice. We might as well show the reverse transformation of Soundwave, because there's not a lot to it. So if we just flatten the wings / claws / whatever the hell these things are going to be, just like that, then we could split the main component of the jet or the satellite just like that, and bring the legs down, and then we can just spread the toes as so, and then fold that straight back up. You can sometimes just activate the missile by that smashing against it. Just try not to, that's all. There's not a lot of a good advice for trying to avoid it. Just try not to. Bring the arms down like that, and like that. Get these bits, just split them, and then there's kind of like tabs here which you kind of have to try and fit within the ring of this little bronzy red section here. So just do your best to try and get them to slot in, and there we go, that's that one. It's the same thing on this side. It just helps it keep it a little bit more secure. Take the chest flap, put that down, and then what you actually want to be doing, if we just undo this slightly, push all of that back, and then take his torso, bend it back on itself, just like that, and then, yeah, you see, there you go. That's an example of that lower bit just pushing the missile up. I don't think there's any specifically good way to avoid it. It's just, yeah, if you have it on top like that, that's perfect. That'll help it. But just try and keep the torso back so you are exposing the blue circular roundels, and that's actually the way you want his torso. It shortens his overall length and makes him quite small for a deluxe class figure, but it is the accurate way of transforming him. I've seen people do it where they don't push it back and they make him taller, and indeed I used to do that myself, but this is actually the accurate way to do it. And that's kind of it. Very, very easy transformation. Not a lot to it whatsoever. So that has been our look at the Revenge of the Fallen Deluxe Class Soundwave. Overall, I think it's a very decent figure. It's not perfect by any means, and it is very, very basic. But having actually seen the Studio Series version in other YouTubers' reviews, and just in my head comparing that to this is easily the superior figure. And because I don't have any experience with the Dark of the Moon Studio Series. Now, of course, when I'm talking about the Studio Series before in this video, I'm specifically talking about the Revenge of the Fallen version. Comparing this to its Studio Series counterpart, this is definitely the better one. Mainly because this one is a very solid figure in its own right, and it's bristling full of colour. The newer version is just a very dull grey, like a silver grey, and it doesn't look very appealing. This one actually looks appealing. It's very G1 inspired in terms of its deco, and it's bristling with personality. And yes, he is arguably shell-formery if you like. He's got a hideous amount of kibble on him, and his alternate modes don't really exist, but he is reasonably fun. He has a gimmick at least, he looks menacing, and I actually do recommend him. I think in terms of movie sound waves, this and maybe the Studio Series Dark of the Moon version are the definitive figures. And yeah, don't feel any shame about picking this guy up. He's an old figure at this point, but, you know, he still has it. He's still rocking it. He knows who he is. He knows what he's about. And he looks reasonably good on a display. Now, I have better figures in my collection. I have loads of better figures. Some of them you saw in the size comparison. But he's still solid enough. He's still solid. So that's Soundwave. Thank you everybody so much for stopping by and checking out this video. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And share it around to help out the channel. And until the next time, see you all later.